Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Gina Smarecki, and I'm the events manager here at Nuspire. I'll be your host for this live session. Today's webinar is all about current cybersecurity and IT challenges and purchasing priorities. We're really excited to reveal a glimpse of Nuspire's annual study and the top 10 CISO buying trends of 2022. This is a proprietary study we recently completed. We will be coming out with a report, but for now, this is a first look at this data reserved for all of you that are here today. We will be giving away some gift cards for some InfoSec swag to 5 lucky registrants here today. So watch your email. I'll be notifying the winners in the coming days. If you do have questions during the presentation, go ahead and submit them in the questions and answers tab. Also, there's a different tab for the chat, so feel free to go ahead and use that and chat in. Let us know where you're joining in from today. Also, just wanted to let you know that everyone will receive a follow-up email with a link to watch the recording of this session. So at this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today, Michelle Bank and J.R. Cunningham. Michelle is the Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Nuspire. She leads the overall success of Nuspire's product roadmap, marketing program, and growth, with over 20 years of experience in the cybersecurity and technology industries. And J.R. is the Chief Security Officer at Nuspire. He's an innovator and premier thinker in cybersecurity and risk management. He's performed executive consulting and architecture and assessment work across the globe and in a wide variety of industries. And now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Michelle and JR.
Thank you, Gina. It's great to see all the participants today and hope you have lots of questions towards the end. So one of the things that I wanted to also talk about is how we're going to do this readout of the study. So context, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the data and the methodology around the survey. And then JR, I love doing these with JR because he's going to bring together the real world experience. He's been a CISO. He is a CISO for us at Nuspire. And he also runs our security practice. So he hears a lot from clients and he can kind of bring these to life. So he was sort of my partner in all things that we're doing when it comes to the survey and anything that we're actually developing going forward. So first, I'm going to talk about why we did it. Many reports that you see, they talk about buying trends and concerns, but not always together. So we wanted to look at people are concerned about something, but does that mean they're actually going to buy or do they need help outsourcing? So we wanted to take a little slightly different lens on what that would look like. The other thing is we wanted to focus on our market. Oftentimes we see a lot of reports that kind of either they slide in the small business side or they go way up market in the enterprise space. And as an MSSP, a lot of our clients are sort of in the middle and they can fall through the cracks. So we really wanted to look at the needs of our target. We also wanted to balance and look at the study and why we introduced it over time. So this is not going to be the first time we are doing an annual study. So next year at this time, we will look at what are the changes that we saw. So those are a few things that I just want to note before we get started. The other thing is, as we reflect on the audience, and I said, generally speaking, like, who do we target as an MSSP? But the thing I loved about this approach is we interviewed 200 CISOs and IT security companies, decision makers. We hired an outside firm to help us with this because we didn't want it to specifically come from Nuspire. We didn't want to have jaded opinions about it. We wanted true blue answers. We looked at companies that were 500 to 10,000 employees across the spectrum. So we didn't weight too far in one category. We also looked at a wide span of budgets. So again, across the board, we didn't weight, 80% in the $3 million bucket. We looked across all of them. The methodology was an online survey, but we also did what's called a dual max diff, and I'll explain what that is later on. It looks at multiple dimensions, and it's a great way to look at things when it comes to comparing different factors and what's really going on underneath. So that's one thing about the methodology. When it comes down to, I'm going to kick off the detailed findings. And then that's where we're really going to get into this with some of the things with JR, because I know he's going to have a lot of great insights into the data that we present. So one of the first questions that we asked was thinking about their opportunities, to get a background. We wanted to find out where they spent their time. And not surprising, a lot of folks spend their time on the security program strategy and building that out, managing the security tech stack. And you're going to see as we move into this, how that kind of comes to life throughout the study. And then threat research, threat awareness, and threat hunting, which you're also going to see as we look at our research and how we're building the roadmap later on.
Michelle, I think this is really interesting because if you go back into, decades ago in our profession, the security strategy could remain relatively constant. It just had to adapt to the threats because they changed all the time. But business strategy and IT strategy used to really not change that often. And what I read out of this slide was that, whoa, businesses are changing really fast and IT strategies are changing really fast. And so security strategies have to adapt much more quickly than they ever had to in the past. And they have to be more responsive to changes in consumer dynamics for companies to deal with consumers. Just in the last few years, things like COVID and the supply chain issues and whatnot, those have caused changes in business and IT strategy that force maybe faster than what we're used to changes in security strategy.
One of the things that we also focused on is whether or not our clients agreed or disagreed when it comes to statements about their specific organization. And one of the things that, we always hear about skill sets, and that really came up when you look at the 34% had said it's hard to attract and retain qualified cybersecurity consulting. And that's one reasons why a lot of them look to somebody like an MSSP for help. I'm going to move to the next slide. Here is one thing, and this is actually going to be great to get JR's commentary on this one. So a lot of our clients said that, and participants in the survey said that they were very comfortable in their confidence in their program, but they still feel like they have vulnerability. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And looking at, this is an evolving market. Everything is changing all the time, not just the technology and what our clients are using from a tech stack perspective, but also what the threats are.
Michelle, I love this slide and I love the last two slides. My first comment on this slide is I really want to meet that 2% of people that believe they are not at all vulnerable. We need to have a conversation with them. What I took away from the last slide around the greatest concerns, and then this slide about confidence is, security and IT leaders generally believe they have the right plan, they're doing the right things, but they're still scared. And then when you go back and look at the previous slide and compare it to this one, part of this is that talent issue really hitting home. Like, I've invested in my tech stack. I've done what I think I need to do to be compliant, to be as secure as I possibly can be, manage the threats that are, the risks that are appropriate for my business, monitor the threats, but I'm still worried. And when we look at kind of where we think people are susceptible, where they think they're susceptible, it's not the traditional stuff, right? It's not the web browsing and email security and vulnerability management. That's the stuff that we've been pretty good at for a long time. It's the cloud applications, it's the end users. And I know you're going to talk about work from home here coming up. It's that stuff that's newer to our business that we might kind of have the tech to deal with, but it's the people side of the equation that really has us concerned. Can I deal with the risks that emerge and adapt to emerging threats in this new landscape? They're fascinating. I still want to meet that 2%. We got to talk.
Yeah. What we also looked at, and you led into that, JR, is when we thought about their biggest challenge, when they talk about vulnerabilities, when they talk about cybersecurity within their organization, where they feel their biggest challenges are. And when we look at it, remote work, that hasn't changed. In fact, when you think about during the beginning of the pandemic, everyone went remote. A lot of organizations realized the benefits after almost 2 years of this, and it's not going away. People are still going to be remote. So how they're continuing to deal with it. The rate of change, this has been a factor that's been ongoing. I'm going to predict that even next year, this is going to be one of their top changes. Endpoint security, another one. I think that ties really well into the remote work environment. Since they're going off, they making sure that when somebody is working remotely, how do we make sure that it's secure? So these kind of all tie together.
Michelle, what I find very interesting about this is part of why remote work is still on the radar, even after we've had all this time due to COVID to, quote, figure it out, is when COVID hit, we swung a bunch of our projects from traditional perimeter security stuff to, I've got to enable IT from home and protect it. And we knew that after that change occurred, there'd be kind of a cleanup period where security essentially followed IT and started to clean up some of the security implications of doing really quick work at home deployments. But where the pendulum has swung back in the middle now is we've got work from home and we have the whole, return to the office. And then of course, in the middle, the hybrid model where we're doing a little bit of both. So now the pendulum isn't just, okay, I only need to pay attention to the people at home. Now it's, oh yeah, I've got this, perimeter in this office and this data center that I need to worry about. And then I have people at home and I've got the people in the middle. And so, this paradigm shift, I think, is going to be with us for quite some time. I agree with you.
Yeah, and you gave a little hint to when we talk about the dual max diff section, because the things that came out of that really showcase what you're saying. There we go. So the other one is a lot of the studies that we've all read about is a lot talk about threats. So we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that to find out what types of threats are the most concerning. And by the way, like if in fact internally we need to educate our employees, where are you most concerned? Where do you feel like has the greatest risk? And so that's really what this slide represents. Like in my head, I was like, ransomware is not a big surprise that came up, especially as of late. It's been accelerating when we talk about ransomware. Phishing, another one, data breaches. And then on the flip side, looking internally from an internal perspective, IT. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this as we move into the study, but we talk about IT. Finance is a concerning area or department, and then sales and marketing, dealing with outside clients, anyone that's touching very proprietary and closed information that we don't want getting out. So here's where we go into a little bit more around the lack of internal employee training as a top driver. So we did ask the question, again, this is just another view, a deeper dive. into where they felt that they may have vulnerability. Human error and lack of internal employee training is the number one thing that keeps popping up. External threat actors, legacy systems, rate of technology change, you're going to see a theme here. Lack of visibility was one into the vulnerabilities. A lot of preventative measures or elements that I see as a person that's trying to figure out solutions. That was kind of a common theme that I saw throughout this. I'll be interested in JR, your commentary.
Yeah, my big takeaway from this is still a human profession. What we do for a living is still very much a people thing, and it's about protecting people. And sometimes we get caught up in the idea that in cybersecurity, we are about securing technology or securing businesses or taking care of the money, that kind of stuff. And the reality is, at the end of the day, these worries that security and IT leaders have are all very human, people-centric worries. And I think too often, not just we practitioners in the industry, but the product companies, the services companies like ours and other companies, we tend to focus on the technology of it and the service provided instead of the people aspect and the outcome. So this was a good reinforcing slide for me that we're still in the people business at the end of the day.
Yes, totally agree. This one, we wanted to think a little bit outside of, so when we talk to organizations, what are they outsourcing and buying today? Like where are they buying? And then you're going to see a different angle to this later on, where we took a look at what they were concerned about in outsourcing. But this is a key area in the top three. Cloud, it's not going away. Cloud is something huge. CSPM, CASB, EDR, those are the top three. And I know you and I spoke about before this webinar, and I know, JR, you have a lot of commentary on this. I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, Michelle, this was really a slide that it really tugged at my heartstrings a little bit, because as a cybersecurity practitioner, there is a list of things I really want to do, cool technologies, different approaches to managing risk, and they all have to do with cloud security and dealing with endpoints in a new and novel way. And those are the things that get most cybersecurity practitioners excited. And to me, reading this slide is a realization, I don't have the talent to do that internally, even though that's the fun stuff, that's the exciting stuff, that's the out there on the edge stuff. I don't have the internal capability. I got to leverage somebody else to do that. And I've got to take care of the stuff that I have the internal capability to do, which, by the way, is often not the fun stuff. I mentioned vulnerability management earlier, security training and awareness. I mean, that's kind of the grind for us security practitioners. And so this slide really kind of got me as, oh, there's all this cool stuff that we want to do, but there's just not enough talent in our industry to grow this capability internally at every client of ours. And I think, for us as managed security services providers, this was really informative, because, we want to try and tackle the problems that our clients are facing that they can't solve themselves. That's what we're here for. So I thought this was a very neat slide and neat study. And I was also, Michelle, a little bit surprised that even with the maturity of endpoint detection and response, with the maturity of firewall management and Wi-Fi, that those were still kind of up there on the list too. And the reality is, it's just a function of workload and the ability to build the talent to do that stuff, especially 24/7.
Yeah, totally agree. And you brought up endpoint security. I think a lot of it is, like, as you and I both know, over the last 2 years, everyone was attacking that market and different technologies. But by the way, they all require some kind of specialized skill to manage each and every single different type of technology that you're putting on your endpoint. Okay. So we talk about upgrades and enhancements. So what's the biggest impact what would have the biggest impact on your organization when it comes to these vulnerabilities that you're seeing in your security program? And what would be the most we took the approach of looking at the most impactful to resources. And there were, we raised up and highlighted the top 4. So when you look at it from, it's upgrading and enhancing the security skills. So again, talking about how do we think about, if you're running your security program, what are the kinds of skills that you need based on your technology? Real-time threat hunting, preventative, it helps you prevent if there's an issue, you're going to have an incident. Techniques and communication advocating for security investments within company stakeholders. Huge. How do I talk to somebody to really make them understand that if we don't spend the money here, we will spend way more later on if we have an incident? We need to spend money on prevention. And then the other one is, and there's a whole host and you can see these, vulnerability and risk management. So again, this ties back into, how do I know where I stand and what are the things that I need to do?
Michelle, one of my takeaways from this slide, really fascinating, is that the business, the financial leaders of the company and the business leaders tend to look at we security practitioners as, oh boy, here comes JR asking for the newest toy. He wants a gadget here or there. But if you look at these top 4, 2 of them are relatively advanced capabilities, threat hunting and moving cybersecurity skills to the next level. But the other 2, communicating risk to stakeholders, to the board, to management, and then vulnerability and risk management, those are really old problems that had been around for a long time. So I think there's a little bit of a realization here that, yes, there's some stuff that we need to do that's out there on the edge that would, again, to the question posed on the slide, make the biggest impact. But there are also some back to basics things that would also have a big impact, like doing a better job of vulnerability and patch management, and better, security metrics and communication to the board and stakeholders. So to me, this is a sign of maturity in our industry, that we're starting to consider not just the new fancy stuff with the blinky lights, but also, the other stuff that's been around for a while that does have a big impact on our program.
Yeah, and I think one of the other takeaways that I had from this slide in particular, when I look at the study holistically, is you have some things this talks about over the next year, like where are you focused? So on those measures of prevention, but that doesn't mean that the things that are over on the right-hand side are going away. In fact, you'll see on some of the following slides that like MDR is huge. Just because it falls on the right, it's because they're already doing it. They're already outsourcing. So I wanted everyone to keep in mind that is, when we look at this slide, it's what are the things that people feel like they need to focus on, but it doesn't mean the things on the right that they're not doing already. So we also asked about impact, and if they had, like, what is one missing technology, skill, or service that they felt would have the biggest impact on their organization? And this one, we looked at general technology, so advanced automation, making sure that they're prevention. So this is another common theme: prevention, prevention, prevention. Highly skilled and trained cybersecurity professionals. Again, this keeps cropping up as one of the top concerns, or one of the top things that can help solve. More end user employee education. Again, another one that keeps popping up. And then more reliable protection for remote workers. So again, this goes back to looking at endpoint and some of their concerns around remote workspace.
Michelle, I think one of the unspoken between the lines statements that this data shows is that the folks that we need to train in cybersecurity are beyond who we traditionally would have considered. As an example, we've always known that somebody in accounting that has access to the bank account is somebody that we want to protect against phishing, and therefore we want to make sure they have up-to-date phishing training. But now, because of the digitization of business, because of Industry 4.0 and a lot of the stuff that's happening on factory floors regarding automation, Because of the app-based world that we live in, we now have people within the business that can generate risk, not just be vectors for exploit, but we have developers that may be writing code for our new business app that can inject vulnerabilities if they're not trained on what to look for. We have folks purchasing cloud services that may not configure them properly if they don't know what to look for. So this training and awareness component is not just that traditional, fish people and see how they do and wag your finger at them if they do a bad job. It's also about giving cybersecurity skills to an audience that, historically speaking, didn't really need to have them. And so that's what I kind of read between the lines in this data.
I agree with you, JR, on that one. One of the things that we looked at, and now we're going to get into the exciting part. I get giddy over the dual max diff. This is an area. So first I want to explain a little bit more about what that is. So we looked at 2 dimensions of interest instead of 1, and this is where we saw a lot of cross-pollination around what people were concerned about and worried about versus, in a lot of ways, what they wanted to look for from a solutions provider and outsource. And we have to understand both. We have to understand where people are concerned and where we can help, but also where people are actually buying and how we can inform, for example, from my perspective in product, what should that roadmap be? When we look at it, the way that we approach this, it increases our accuracy by eliminating all other factors. So the people actually can only pick from 2 versus rank order, which, as if anyone's done a rank order, you get kind of lazy when it comes to the things that might fall at the bottom and you just kind of slot them in. I don't know where this goes. So this kind of forces you to pick between the most important things. It also provides us with ways that where we can take actionable results and really make sure that we're providing what these 200 participants are recommending for direction and where they want to go. So here's where we get into a lot of the meat of the survey. So I'm going to go through the concerns, and then we'll go through a little bit around where we stand around outsource. And I hope you guys have a number of questions that you're interested in, but then we're going to cross tabulate them in sort of a, how does this look overall when we take the 2 data sets? So the security programs, as I mentioned, they're concerned. Like I said, when we went through the slide, if you look at the stuff on the right where people are going to look, well, by the way, they're still concerned about managed detection and response. Number 2, an overall security program. Vulnerability and posture assessments. Number 3. So these things are extremely important and they're worried about them. So I know, JR, you and I talked about this slide in particular. I'd love to hear your point of view on this.
Yeah, Michelle, the duo max diff was brand new to me when you described the concept. And one of the things about it that really resonated with me, and I see it here in the data, is if you talk to an IT decision maker or a security leader, their number one concern is usually their number one concern far and away from every other concern that they have. If you are in most businesses today, you're really worried about ransomware, it's at the top of your list. And then there's, quote, everything else. And, if you're in healthcare, you're worried about patient confidentiality. If you're on the factory floor, you're really worried about, the robots making the widgets continuing to operate. So availability is a big concern. What this did for me was it brought out okay, I get that ransomware is your number one concern, but in that bucket of number 2s and 3s, what do we all have in common? And what I really took away from this was, even though there are wild differences in individual businesses, there is a lot that we have in common in the cybersecurity space about the things that we're worried about, especially the high number 2s or the middle of the bucket number 2s. And those kind of came out here. And what I think that's fascinating, because we all like to believe we're different and we're special and no business is like mine. But at the end of the day, we really do have a lot in common regarding what we're worried about. And I suppose for you, that was really valuable from a product roadmap perspective too, because you can look for those common threads and help determine the future of our business.
Absolutely. So now we're going to get into the outsourced. So this is what was exciting to me. It's not always the same. So just because I'm concerned about it, I might say, I can figure this out internally. I don't need help. So but there are also things that are still overall at the top. For example, overall security program improvements, number one on the concern, number one on the outsource. Monitor detection and response, same thing. Where we get a little bit more of differentiation is number 3 on the technology optimization and integrations. And once we show you the cross-pollination of these two, it'll really come to life in a visual way. But I loved the fact that you can see the consistencies, but also the differences in where people want help, outside help. Love to hear your commentary on this one too, JR.
Yeah, I got more kicks out of reading the bottom part of it when we looked at things like OT and IoT and compliance management, orchestration automation, because what that told me is those tend to be things that are extremely specific, hyper specific to a particular business. The robot that runs the widget maker on a factory floor for a company is not going to be the same for everybody else. And so what this told me was IT decision makers and leaders are ready and willing to outsource the stuff that they need to get done, but isn't extremely unique to their business, so much so that they wouldn't be able to successfully have someone else manage it for them. And so, it kind of fits well with, on the flip side, what we do for a living is an MSSP to say, okay, great. You need help. Number one, you are willing to outsource staying current with threats and understanding what's going on in the rest of the industry. A question we get all the time from our clients is, what is everybody else in my industry doing? How do I compare? What are folks spending money on? We get asked that question, especially the cybersecurity consulting team here at Nuspire is asked that question all the time. This tells me that organizations are more willing than ever to outsource that type of capability that they most likely are not going to be able to successfully build in-house, and they're never going to have the vantage point of seeing across a wide variety of customers and industries to be able to answer some of those questions. And then there's a 24/7 piece. The days of walking out of the security team office on Friday night and turning the lights off and coming back on Monday morning to see what happened, those days are over. We have to be 24/7 in the cybersecurity space. And a lot of organizations just don't have the desire to build a 24/7, 365 capability for the idea that they're essentially looking for one bad event to happen and they got to catch it on Friday night. So very interesting data. And I think it bears out the idea that security leaders are pretty pragmatic people and pretty honest about what can I do and what should I ask somebody else to do for me.
You're right. And then now we get to the crescendo, is what I call it, on the end of this presentation. I love this slide because I'm a very visual person. And so this kind of pulls both dimensions together. And so I'm going to explain a little bit of how this works. We took concerns and we took outsourcing. If it's in the top right quadrant with the big circle around, they're very concerned about it. And they're also wanting help. If they're in the top left, they're definitely need help with it, but not as concerned, and then so on and so forth. So less likely to outsource is at the bottom, but there's still a concerning level. So when you look at concern for skills gap, again, that one comes up, there's a concern, but less likely to outsource. They may look internally for folks, which I found very fascinating. That particular one, a data point in particular. And then we look at the stuff on the top left, the things that kind of resonated to me again, when we highlighted this, is there's a lot here on the top that people want help with prevention. They want to optimize what they have. They want help with the technology that they have. They want oversight and help with their security program improvements. Everything here, even threat hunting, is all about how can you guys help me prevent? Incident response, the fact that it fell below the line kind of surprised me. But then as I was thinking through this, I'm thinking incident response. Yeah, that's not a prevention. That's I don't want it unless I have to kind of thing. So JR, I love your take on this, but that's.
Yeah. Michelle, you call this a crescendo slide. To me, it's the gladiator slide. There's a scene where Maximus asks Cicero, his assistant, do you find your job hard? And his response was, sometimes I do what I want to, the rest of the time I do what I have to. And, this slide paints that picture for me in the sense of, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Any cybersecurity practitioner, and frankly, any IT leader, there's stuff we really want to do. It's on the list. We think it's the right thing to do. Seldom do you find folks in security or IT that want to do the wrong thing. We always kind of have this idea of what we want to do. But there's this bucket of stuff that's just a grind. It's not fun. And it's the stuff that we have to do. And we have to do it either to, keep ourselves in compliance with the law, or we have to do it because it's a minimum requirement to keep the business operational and due care in protecting an organization. And what I see here on this is a smattering of both of those things. But when I look at where do I absolutely need help from the outside, there's a little bit of both in here. Like, okay, I know I need to monitor, detect, and respond to threats 24/7 now. That's not I'm really excited about this and I want to do it. I kind of have to, I have to do this. Improving the security program. I know I want to do that. I'm not quite sure how. Really interested in getting a third party take on, what should I be thinking about here? What's everybody else doing, to the question, I brought up earlier. Technology optimization, help me with overlap. I've got all this stuff, all this gear. I've got all these licenses. Where do I have overlapping capability? Where do I have gaps? How has that changed with, the expansion of a particular platform that I'm invested in? Let's say my firewall vendor now does vulnerability management. How does that change things? So I was really fascinated by the fact that, folks are willing and want to hand to companies like ours the stuff that some of it they have to do, and some of it's the fun stuff that they want to do, with the realization that, either way, you might need a little bit of help. And then the likelihood to outsource the stuff on the lower left hand, what I thought was really interesting about that is, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of this tends to be hyper specific to the business, or there's a very interesting reason why one would not want to outsource. I'll give you an example. The incident response, I, like you, was very surprised that was as low as it is for likelihood to outsource. And as I started to unpack that a little bit, one of the conclusions that I came to is, most organizations have a cyber insurance provider that's actually mandating who they're going to use for incident response. So therefore, they don't really need to get that creative or put that much thought into it. They know that if there's an incident, they need to have a certain amount of internal capability to get them through that first, 24, 48-hour period. And then their cyber insurance provider is going to bring in, the big guns and take over the response activity. So there's some hidden stuff in the data that kind of told me that, okay, there are reasons why companies are choosing to not or not as predisposed to outsource this particular capability than would initially meet the eye. My last comment here: so much of this and so much of a lot of these slides tie back to that people problem. We just don't have enough skills in our industry. And, when we talk about trying to mentor talent and grow talent and, make sure that we as an industry are recruiting, women and minorities and folks from other industries and all that, it's very real right here. There aren't enough of us doing this job. And therefore, companies are looking at stuff that traditionally they would have said, no, I'm just going to do that myself. And they're looking around and saying, there aren't enough people on planet Earth to do this. I'm going to have to hand it to somebody that's built that specialty capability around, that particular thing.
Yeah, what I'm looking forward to is what this looks like next year. Because you and I both know things like cybersecurity insurance is becoming a topic that people are very interested in. There's some elements even around assessments and vulnerability that's, yes, they're concerned about it, but I don't like, I just see from a trending perspective that things are going to change next year when we do this study.
Michelle, you mentioned that your prediction was next year, remote work would still be up at the top of the list. Is there anything you think will fall off the list?
That's a great question. I didn't look at it from that. I think some of the buzzwords, I think even EDR, I think in my head, I'm like, that's probably going to come a little bit lower because I feel like it's something that everyone has attacked. And if they're not, they're finalizing and getting what they need now. So it's still popular, but not, I think that one might become a little bit lower. I think, yeah, as people establish sort of a cadence for the baseline elements, like cyber insurance in 2 years from now, when everybody has it next year and it becomes really popular, it may, fall off as far as like a concern from that perspective. I don't know. What do you think?
I think digital transformation is going to fall off the list at some point. I don't know if next year or the year after. And the reason I say that is that was the primary concern for IT leaders, for the last decade, right? This whole idea of digital transformation. I think the transformation has occurred. And I think the learning of the quote digital transformation is that, the idea of a transformation is that you move from one state to another, you transform. And I think what we've learned is, we started off at one state and now transformation and change is constant. There is no end state to this transformation. And so I think, as to your point about it being a buzzword, I think as a buzzword, as a concept of this idea that we got to gear up and get ready for digital transformation, the transformation has occurred. Business is digital, the world is digital. As consumers, we're certainly digital. And so, I think that will probably drop off the list at some point. That'd be my prediction.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if our predictions come true. Digital transformation, I didn't move. I agree with you. I feel like it's just been on for decades. So it's something that I'm like thinking, well, maybe it moves.
Right.
But it's one of those buzzwords that hasn't gone away a whole lot. So yeah, I know we're getting down to the end and we have 2 minutes left and I see some questions coming in and I know, Gina, you want to wrap this up. So if we don't get to answer your question, we will do it. I think we can, I don't know if there's a way, Gina, that we can do it post meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you guys both for that great discussion and sharing the data. We do have a minute here or so, and we can kind of address the one question if you guys want to real quick. But I just wanted to plug our next webinar real quick on September 22nd. We will be going live with our partner Fortinet and featuring a guest speaker from IDC to talk about the top 5 drivers of MDR adoption. So I'm going to share the link there for anyone that may be interested in the chat. Also, if you're looking for a copy of this, the slides here today, I will also share that for you here and you will get the recording as well. So there is that. So the one question I see from Perry is, how would you approach an organization that is addressing their cybersecurity environment by tools rather than having a holistic business approach?
I think that's a great question for JR.
I'll happily take it. Perry, first of all, thank you. And I see your observation about, results feeling like they're about tools. Actually, they weren't so much about tools, they were more around capability. And I'll give you an example. The EDR topic that came up repeatedly throughout the survey, endpoint detection and response, the way we view it, it's not just about having, SentinelOne or CrowdStrike or Carbon Black or whatever for a tool on the endpoint. It's also about the operational capability to run that tool, the monitoring to tell you when something happens with that tool. So it's the overall capability, including the tools and the technology. Where we run into trouble, to the heart of your question, is when organizations have the belief that a tool will solve a specific security problem for them. Usually security problems, especially today, are have enough complexity to them that, first of all, it's usually not just a single tool required in the toolbox, but it's also a series of policies, standards, procedures, processes, the right people in the mix, the right MSSP or security partner, the right buy-in from the business to make sure that that capability is fully realized. I'll give you a great example. SIM, we get asked all the time. Obviously, we're an MDR company. We manage SIM for a lot of organizations. The capability we're providing is managed detection and response. The tool in the toolbox is the SIM platform. And a lot of organizations deploy a SIM just to put the check in the box that says, I'm collecting and correlating logs and sticking them, someplace where I can access them later. But the true heart of the capability, and the problem we're really trying to solve, is when something bad happens in the environment, I need to be able to pick up on that quickly and respond to it and figure out where it came from, how it's spreading, all of that kind of stuff that's important for the detection and, response capability. And so when we have organizations that are really heavy on tools and they're still struggling, and by the way, we see this a lot in new customers that come to us and say, okay, I've got all these tools, but I'm still struggling with my cybersecurity program. Usually it's about, we've been focusing on tools and not capabilities, and we got to have a capabilities conversation. And those capabilities center around all things, including the tools, the people, the processes, et cetera. Fantastic question.
Thank you, JR, and thank you, Perry, for the question. That will conclude the question and answer since we're out of time today. But if you have other questions, go ahead and email us at webinars@nuspire.com. We'll make sure to address those for you, or go ahead and contact us through our website anytime at nuspire.com. Any closing thoughts from either of you, Michelle or JR?
Really appreciate it. I love doing these. I am a data-driven person, and this was amazing to see all the results. And I really appreciate all of you for coming out to view this webinar.
Michelle, I just want to say thanks to you and the team for having me here. As a security practitioner, I have learned a lot about how important it is to understand what the market is doing. And I've learned that by watching you and your team do things like this to really get to the heart of what are people, spending money on, what are they worried about, above and beyond just the pure security practitioner perspective of it, but that broader view. And so I learn a lot when you do these types of studies too. So please keep at it. Please invite me to the next one.
JR, because I am not the security practitioner, so it's always helpful to have you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.